Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Amby Burfoot, welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running, State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running, State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week, we've got a new and unexpected category of super special runners from this planet. We're going to talk to one of the oldest runners out there. In fact, I don't know about this, but he could be the oldest guest ever to have been interviewed on a podcast.
That's right, Amby. John Cahill is turning 101 years old, or years young in his case, this month. And while he's not actually running these days, he was completing 5Ks just a few years back and was an absolute top-ranking marathon runner in his 70s when he won many age group titles at the New York City Marathon, the St. George Marathon, and other big events. But before we get to John, let's take a quick look at the biggest running news. Amby, what have you had on your screen the last week or so?
Well, George, I think we were both paying a lot of attention to the election by the International Olympic Committee of its next president. And of course, we were openly rooting for Sebastian Coe. Things didn't go well for Seb. In fact, he was a very distant third to the winner, Kirsty Coventry, and the second place finisher, Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr. Coventry received 49 votes, a strong showing on the very first ballot. That put her over the top. Seb Coe only had 8. That's a bit of a stinging defeat for him. Of course, it is great. We all agree that the IOC finally has a female president and that she's from an African country, Zimbabwe. But there are questions. We don't know a lot about what went on behind the scenes, but we do know that Coventry has never led an organization as big as Seb did at the London Olympics, and then also the last decade at World Athletics, where so much has happened. She's widely believed to have gotten a big boost from the outgoing president, Thomas Bach, and some are even suggesting that he'll still have a lot of influence behind the scenes now. Coe was a more radical choice for sure. He actually awarded prize money last summer in Paris to track and field athletes who won, which the old guard did not like. He's banned Russia from World Athletics, which the IOC doesn't like a lot because it kind of thinks that it's a global peacekeeping organization, whether it is or not. And he was very definitely protecting the female category of sports with regulations that now include DNA testing that will keep transgender females out of global athletics competitions. Since his loss, Coe remains the head of World Athletics, and he's indicated that he's going to strongly pursue the path that he has taken in recent years. He's got basically nowhere else to go in the sports world, I wouldn't say. And he seems determined now to really stake out a leadership legacy in his sport, World Athletics or track and field, that maybe will contrast with Coventry at the IOC. We'll have to wait and find out what happens. Another topic that we can't ignore is at the World Indoor Championships, American Shelby Houlihan brought home a silver medal in the women's 3,000. Houlihan, of course, recently returned from a 4-year ban for the infamous burrito incident that led to her testing positive for a steroid in her system. I can't think of another distance runner who's returned after 4 years to retain excellence on the global stage and to win a medal as she did indoors. I actually think it's kind of remarkable that she kept herself fit and motivated for all of that time. And so I certainly give her credit for that. Others, of course, think she should have received a lifetime ban, perhaps, that all athletes should receive lifetime bans for cases that they lose before the Court of Arbitration and other top organizations. I don't know whether that's the right way to go, but I know the doping debate and the sentences that are meted out is something that'll be with us for a long time. George, I got a little long-winded there. Maybe you can be more concise in some of the things you've been following.
Yeah, Amby, I'll pick off where you were on the World Indoor Championships that took place in Nanjing, China. And, as always, they featured some of the biggest names in the sport: Mondo Duplantis, Grant Holloway, and, of course, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, who performed again at the highest level, winning golds in both the 1500 and the 3000. But Amby, at the same time, many of the biggest names in the sport just didn't show up at the World Championships. No Sidney McLaughlin, Noah Lyles, Sha'Carri Richardson, Gabby Thomas, even the three medalists from Paris in the men's exciting 1500, Cole Hocker and Josh Kerr and Jared Naguse. They weren't there. The world's the world's greatest miler, female, Faith Kipyegon, not there. And in my view, Amby, it's not a great look for the World Championships. And I'm not sure fully what it says about track and field at this point after such a sensational Olympics in Paris. But now all eyes are turning to Michael Johnson's Grand Slam meets, which begin right away in Jamaica. And you and I will be talking about how that one goes, the opener, in, probably our very next podcast.
Well, we certainly will, and Grand Slam does have some of those big names you mentioned. Particularly, a lot of people are interested in the men's 1500 and 800 because it's got Hocker, it's got Kerr, it's got Naguse, and it's got real competitors for them. I want people to remember that there's a 3000 and 5000 also, which will have Grant Fisher, one of America's favorite and best distance runners now, and of course he'll have real competition because there's big money on the line, and somebody's going to take home a lot of it. George, here's a question for you. Regarding these meets, some of the distance fans like you and me are really worried that because they're head-to-head competitions and not Olympic races, everybody's going to jog them and just run for place and go for the money. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a concern. We may get some great races, which is fine. But that's competition. Listen, there's no pacemakers in the Olympics, and you and I know how exciting the Olympics are. So we may take our eyes off the watches and just keep our eyes on the competition on the track. And, from my view, that's not such a bad thing.
Well, let's face it, there hasn't been something like this to come along on the track scene in I don't know how long. I actually went to a professional track meet. I think it was called the ITA in the late 70s in Boston, and saw a couple of phenomenal performances. But the league didn't last very long, of course. So Michael Johnson's got his name, his intelligence, and a lot of dollars behind the 4 meets that they'll be holding this year. And we'll all certainly be watching closely. And then afterwards, because this is what we do and this is what track fans do, we'll be talking like crazy about the good and the bad of these meets. And so that's it. That's our review this week of the biggest recent news from the world of running.
This week we've got our oldest guest ever, and I mean really old, with no insults intended, because he's also, in some significant ways, one of our fastest guests ever.
John Cahill is 100 years old, and he's very close to 101. He's been a close friend of mine for, gosh knows, John, I don't know, 25, 30 years.
Yep.
Last year, I joined many of his other friends at his 100th birthday party in Utah. John ran, get this, a 3:05 marathon when he was 72 and was still running 3:30 5 years later at 77. He achieved all of this despite not beginning to run until age 62.
John Cahill, welcome to our podcast. We're really excited to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, and I'm honored.
So, John, let's begin with an updated bio, which we do with all of our guests, and we filled in a few of your details at the top. But tell us when your 101st birthday will be, where you are now, a little about your personal and family life, and what you do every day in the morning after you get out of bed.
Well, my 101st birthday will be on April the 11th of this year, and I'm probably going to have a small party with my family. And there were other questions you asked me. I forgot what they were.
Oh, just your bio. What do you do? What is your family makeup? Give us a little of that.
Well, I married a marvelous woman who deserved a better husband than me, but of course there aren't any. And we had 9 children, 7 boys and 2 girls. The oldest boy will be 75 this year, and the youngest 2 are twins, a boy and a girl, will be 59 this year. And, of course, I'll be 101, I hope. And they all live, 5 of them live here in Salt Lake City. One lives in Seattle, one lives in Argentina, and one lives in Boise.
Yeah.
John, I don't envy you having to keep those rapscallions in line day after day, but I want to jump to the middle of your life. I think you were perhaps in your early 60s when you decided there were some things going on in your life that you didn't like and that you wanted to change around. What was that?
Well, first of all, I don't know whether this was the most important was. One I remember, I was a little bit overweight, and I wasn't happy with that. And that's when I think I weighed about 165 pounds. Today I weigh 135. And I think I started running to lose weight. And I found out after a while that for an old fart, I was pretty fast. And then my ego kicked in. Did I answer your question, or did I just talk?
So let me ask you, but you also discovered that you had a heart problem, not the best news for someone who's decided to get fit and to even begin to start running races in your 60s. So tell us about that and what kept you running.
Well, when I was probably 62 or 63, when I would run, I would often get this strange feeling on my left side. So I went to see my friendly cardiologist, and he said, well, he did an whatever they call them, and he found out that I had a 50% blockage in a 90% blockage in one of my coronary arteries. And after that, I had what do they call them anyway?
Bypass?
No, where they put something in the artery and they squeeze it. Angioplasty. Angioplasty, and apparently it worked because I'm still alive.
Yeah, it sounds to me like we all need the name of your cardiologist, John, because he did
Robert Lee Fowles.
Okay.
He's become a very, very dear friend of mine, and when I drove, I quit driving a couple of years ago for obvious reasons, and I used to visit him 2 or 3 times a week, and we're dear friends. He's probably close to 80 now, but I've told him he cannot stop practicing until I die. And he said, well, hurry up.
John, I keep my cardiologist close at hand, too, so
yes,
I think we're both doing the right thing there. But, a little heart surgery, angiogram, that doesn't explain how you got to 305 at age 72 in your first marathon. How do you go from A to, 100 times A?
Well, actually, I have to correct you a little bit. My first marathon I ran when I was 65 years old. It was in St. George, and I ran 3:04:50. 7 years later, when I was 72, I ran St. George in 3:05, exactly 1 minute slower. And frankly, I can't explain that.
Well, what
That was
would
a pretty good marathon, I'll tell you.
But you can tell us the training you did to achieve those. What do you recall of your training?
Well, I remember that in my, of course, as a long distance runner, I had OCD like all of us do have. I used to regularly run 40 to 50 miles a week. And when I would get ready for a marathon, I would build it up to about 60 a week. And I'd do 1 week when I did 70, and then I'd drop down to 60 again. So I think I ran a lot, and I enjoyed running. And as I said, I found out that I was good at it. And then, as I said, my ego kicked in.
So you had a coach, a guy named Tom Miller, who was also from Utah. And
Yes, sir.
He even put you on the cover of his book, which wasn't very sexy, frankly. But what did you learn from Tom?
Well, I think that a simple thing that he had me do changed my running career. He had me lower my stride length, which enabled me to pick up my turnover rate, and that changed. That's when I started to get fast. When I lowered my stride length.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, one thing I'm interested in, John, and that I don't know the answer to, is you ran all those great marathons in your 60s and 70s, but how long did you keep running hard marathons? Were you still doing them in your 80s?
I think my last New York City, I did New York 8 times. By the way, it's my favorite race, truly. It's very interesting. I ran my last New York when I was 84 years old, and I think I ran a marathon in St. George when I was 93. I'm not sure about that.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. And you were still running 5Ks until how recently, John?
Well into the 90s, I would do 5Ks. Our big holiday out here is the 24th of July. It's called Pioneer Day, when the Mormons came into the Salt Lake Valley, and they have a 5K every time. And I ran that well into my 90s. And my times weren't important. What was important was finishing.
And you used to do like even well into your 90s, maybe 96 years old. You were doing like 30 of those a year, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think that old, but in my prime, I do 40 to 50 races every year, sometimes 2 every Saturday. Saturdays, because Sunday is the big Mormon day here, all the races here are on Saturday. So I'd often run.
What was it that you liked so much about going to the races? Because that is a lot of races for anyone to run in the year. And also, you said you ran New York City 8 times, and it was your favorite. What made it your favorite?
Well, it's not an easy race, as you know, and you pass through so many wonderful neighborhoods. And you just run all through New York, and then you enter the park at 87th Street. It's just an exciting race, I'll tell you. There's nothing like turning the corner at Columbus Circle when you have about a half a mile yet to go and running up that slight hill and crossing the finish line. It's a thrill, a real thrill.
So, John, let me shift gears and go back to your early childhood. Where did you grow up, and what kind of sports were you interested in? And, tell us a little bit about the early days.
Well, I was born and raised in Salina, Kansas, a town of about 19,000 people. My dad owned a grocery store, and the only sport I went to Catholic grade school and high school, and the only sport they had was basketball. So in high school, I played basketball, and I wasn't very good at it, by the way, but I did play basketball. And then this is kind of interesting. I went to Notre Dame, and then was a real jock school because of their football program. And it's interesting that these were the days when, you might recall, freshmen could not participate in varsity sports.
Right.
So every university had a freshman team. So they put a sign up that said tryouts for cross country. Well, I didn't even know what the hell it was. But I went over there and I signed up and I ran with those guys. And all I remember is when I finished, I said, Jesus Christ, that's tough. Well, the same day, they had tryouts for the freshman basketball team. So I went out and I made the freshman basketball team. But it's interesting. If I hadn't have made the basketball team, I wonder how good a runner I might have been. What I personally think is I think I would have been a good college runner. I don't know that I would have been any better than that.
John, there are no other runners in the known universe who can say they could have made the freshman basketball team at Notre Dame, which, jock school or not, is certainly a big sports school. So that's quite an accomplishment, actually.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I believe, and I got to check this story now, that maybe you were in college already, but 1941, Pearl Harbor, you volunteered to join the Navy. Is that correct? And what was your thought process and your Navy experience like?
I will tell you this. I was spending the summer working for a mining company in Leadville, Colorado, and they had a sign there that said, sign up for the V-12 program. Now, the V-12 program let you join the Naval. I joined the Naval Reserve. On July 1st, 1943, I was called to active duty in what was called the V-7 program, which is a program where young, good-looking guys could become naval officers. And by pure luck, I was sent back to Notre Dame for this V-12 program. I was there about 1 full year, and then I went to midshipman school also at Notre Dame. And I then graduated as an officer and a gentleman. And my son says, well, Dad, you're still an officer. I took him out of my will when he said that. And then I think I've lost my train of thought. But
so you then became an officer. You were pretty young. Of course, back in the Second World War, officers were young. But what were you, 21?
Yes, 1945. There were so many of us. They didn't know what to do with us. They were just turning out ensigns hand over fist. They had nothing to do with this. Of course, the war by that time was pretty much winding down. When I finally got to the Pacific, I think the war was pretty much over. And I was on an APA, a troop ship, and we carried, I may have told you this, we carried trips to Saigon, or to Saipan, Iwo Jima, and places like that.
So finally the war ended. You got out of the Navy. Then what? College, professional life? Tell us about that.
Well, I came back to Salina, Kansas, and I went back to Notre Dame, and I had a year and a half to finish. And I finished in February of 48. And then I immediately went to Marquette University Law School in Milwaukee. And 3 years later, I had become a lawyer. And after 25 years of practicing law, I decided to get an honest job.
And that was?
I know that's one of your favorite lines, John.
Yes.
An honest job outside of the law. But you switched from being an attorney to the owner of a ski lodge, which isn't the most natural thing in my book. How did that jump occur?
Well, it's interesting. In 1970, I had gone out to ski in Alta in 1960, and I kept going back every year, and I stayed at the Peruvian Lodge. And George, you've been there. And in 1970, the people, they were building Snowbird, and I think the people at Alta thought it was going to be the end of Alta. So I bought the lodge in the summer of 1970, and then when I got bored with life as a lawyer, I moved out there and started running the lodge.
So a couple of questions about the Peruvian. Do you want to share with us what you paid for it in 1970?
$330,000.
Yeah.
Which might have been $1 million, I don't know.
And you think it might be worth a little more today?
I've been offered $30 million for it.
Not bad. pretty good.
I can't sell it. Too much of my psyche is involved in that lodge. You know,
John, I've always wanted to ask you a question. I remember that there used to be a kind of famous downhill 5 mile road race, which I think began at the lodge and ran down the mountain somehow.
yes,
We used to read about it at Runner's World, and we thought, wow, this is kind of strange because people would run ridiculous times. Was that race your invention, or were you involved somehow?
Yes, sir, it was. The Alta Proving Lodge downhill dash and barbecue bash, because after the race we had a big barbecue outside the lodge. It was a really fast downhill race. I think the whole thing was downhill. I don't think there was anything flat at all. And I think somebody in one time ran that course in something like 21 or 22 minutes. It was steep downhill.
Wow.
These days there are people organizing marathons that go down from ski lodges, and they drop like 5,000 or 6,000 feet, way more than St. George. I guess you never thought of that.
No. Well, St. George goes from 6,200 to, it drops about 6,000 feet, I think.
Does it? Okay.
But it's a lovely course because you're out in the country most of the time. And I think I ran that 12 times.
Wow.
And every time I tell that, I add a year.
Fair enough.
John, you had these incredible times that we talked about in your 70s, and then aging sets in, and but you kept running, but you got slower inevitably. And what did that feel like for you? And what can you tell aging athletes? What did you do to stay motivated, even as things did begin to, go south a little bit in terms of your times?
Well, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed was meeting my old running friends at the start line. They still have one race in Salt Lake City. It's on the 4th of July, and I can go to that race. It's a 5K, right? It's 5K. And I will still meet 2 or 3 of my old running friends who are not quite as old as I am, but they're still running. And the other was probably my ego that I could still do it. And the finishing time wasn't important. Crossing the finish line was winning.
John, this just occurred to me. I didn't have this on our list of questions, but do you follow the success of the current group of Utah runners? I mean, guys and women at BYU are really kicking it. It must be.
Yeah.
Is that a source of pride?
Yeah. Well, BYU is about 25 miles south, and you're either a BYU fan or a University of Utah fan, and I'm a U of U fan. But we follow the BYU. Those 2 guys were good, weren't they? They finished. They weren't. One of them finished 14th, I think. Do you remember?
In Paris, they were way up there.
They were both top 10, I thought.
Yeah, they were way up there. Yep.
And getting better still.
And Ed Eyestone, I think, is their coach.
He is.
Correct.
He had a good career, too.
He was terrific.
Yeah.
2 Olympics. Yep.
John, go ahead, George.
Now, I was just going to shift away a little and just get into your current training regimen. What do? You go to a health club? What kind of a workout? Is there cross training? What do you do? I mean, people are inspired by you.
Well, the University of Utah has a wonderful sports facility that is about a mile from my condominium. And I try to get over there about 3 times a week. And what I do then is I will work out on the weight machines for about a half an hour. And then I go to the rowing machine, which I dearly love. I don't know why. And I do 600 pulls on the oars. It takes me about 20 minutes. And then I go home and collapse.
That's pretty impressive. I think we don't collapse after that.
Everybody says recovery is a big part of training, John. I'm at the age where a few years from now, like you, I might have to cross out of running and do some of the other stuff. What was it like emotionally to realize that you weren't going to be able to do running anymore and you were going to have to switch to other activities? Was that tough?
I don't remember it being difficult at all. I think I just was happy to be alive and able to get to the gym and work out.
Right. So, John, you travel still to this day, and I know you've got some favorite places. What are they? You got some travel plans coming up for this summer? Tell us.
Yes, I do. Well, first of all, the most interesting place I have ever been is Ethiopia. And if I were to say anything to you guys, visit Ethiopia. It's a fascinating country. And then, of course, my favorite place is probably Sicily, where I went to Sicily the first time in the year 2000, and I stayed about 5 months, and I went back every year after that until the COVID thing came along. But I'm going back to Sicily sometime this summer in May or June, because now Delta has begun a nonstop flight from New York to Catania. And George, you know where Catania is.
I do. Yep.
I think you were in the Navy there.
Right on the Straits of Messina, for sure.
Yeah. Straits of Messina, yeah.
So, John, tell me, what does it feel like to be on the edge of 101 years? Are you still eager to get out of bed in the mornings? What really keeps you going?
Well, I leap out of bed in the morning. Leap is probably the strong word. And I have breakfast while I read the USA Today, which is a crappy newspaper, but a great crossword puzzle. And I then go over to my computer and start checking my stocks. I'm very much into the stock market. And if all things, if we don't crash, I'll leave my children a nice bequest.
John, I should tell people, you said you read USA Today for the crosswords. You also read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times every day. And don't you think your constant interest in the world around you, your curiosity, is one of the driving forces that's kept you so active?
No doubt about it. I love newspapers. I don't want to. I can't read them online. I won't read them online. So I get the New York Times and the USA Today are at my front door every morning, and the Wall Street Journal I get in the mail now. There's no daily delivery, and I read those papers. I save the New York. This is kind of interesting, but I save the New York Times until evening time, and I'll go over to my favorite easy chair with a glass of sambuca, and and the New York Times, and I read the paper for about 45 minutes. And then I collapse into bed again.
Life is good.
Life is good. Sometimes
really good.
It's always good.
John,
by the way, Amby, I wanted to mention to you that you're in Oaxaca now. There's a very famous and well-visited big Aztec relic down there. What's it called?
Monte Alban?
Monte Alban, yes. Have you been there?
Yes, we've certainly been there. We spend most of our time drinking margaritas with mezcal, but we have been to Monte Alban. Mm-hmm. John, there are a lot of us out here listening to you thinking, damn, it sure would be great to be as sharp and active as you are at 101. So tell us, what's your philosophy of life and what has kept you going so strong for so long?
Well, I think kind of an observation. I believe that I have led a charmed life. Why, I do not know. But I enjoy almost everything that I do. And you ask another question, I missed it. Keep moving. That's the answer. Keep moving.
So,
go ahead, George.
Now, I was just going to say the keep moving thing is it shows up so much, it seems to me, with this, what we would call super agers, and you're certainly that. We wrap up our podcasts by giving giving our guests a fairy godmother's 3 wishes, John. They can make this personal, about their family, the world itself, something about running, anything you want for the coming months and years. 3 wishes, but you only get 3.
Well, first of all, good mental health and good physical health. Is that 1 or 2?
Yeah,
1.5.
And then,
yeah, all right.
and then I think it's really important to keep up with the news. And I get my news mostly from those 3 newspapers. And then every night I watch Fox News, not that Fox News, but our local Fox News. And that's the way I keep up pretty much with what's going on. So good mental health, good physical health, and keep up with the news and keep moving. I can't help. I keep saying that. I can't help myself.
Keep moving sounds so simple, but unfortunately not enough people do it, particularly as they age. So I don't think there's any better advice than that. And that's it. That's it for go ahead.
I enjoy walking, but I don't walk nearly as much as I should. And I think I substitute the rowing machine for my walking. But the place where I go is there are 2 ice rinks in this University of Utah facility, and where I do the rowing machine, I can watch the pretty girls doing their basically ballroom dancing down on the ice, and then I will take a couple of turns around the ice track, and then, as I said, I go home and collapse.
You know, I always say there's no need for apologies over what we do. That keeps us moving. If it works for you, just keep looking and keep moving.
Say, by the way, I want to tell you one thing, Amby. 8 or 10 kilometers from downtown Oaxaca, there's a town that sells Indian blankets. And I can't think of the place, but if you can find that town, I would urge you to take a visit out there. It's 8 or 10K.
My wife says that we have 7 of those weavings on our wall back in Connecticut, John. So
you can skip it.
We've been to not every place down here, but certainly a few of them.
Yeah.
So that's it today for our interview with John Cahill. John, thank you so much for joining George and me on our podcast, Running State of the Sports.
Well, truly, it's been my pleasure, and I'm highly honored to have appeared on this program. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
You bet.
Amby, I was lucky enough to attend John Cahill's 100th birthday party in Utah last year, and it was a wonderful gathering. And this interview brought back many fond memories of John and his family and his friends. And but tell me what you took away from our talk with John.
Well, you can't help but enjoy a conversation with a guy who's 101 years old and still full of life and still going to the gym and getting in his workouts and everything else. I particularly liked the message he gave us about his midlife change. He wasn't a particularly healthy or active guy in midlife with chest pains and scares about heart disease. So he checked in with a cardiologist, found out he did have some early heart disease. So he got stents put in, which many people have had done, and he began exercising. And before long, guess what? He finds out that he's a pretty talented distance runner. And once he discovers that, he goes for it. He starts training harder, finds a good coach, goes to some big races and runs absolutely spectacular times. Now we know not everyone's going to be as fast as John, running close to 3 hours in their 70s. But the big point is that people can make changes at midlife or even later in life that really improve all the rest of their days. And that's a very, very important message in the fitness and running world. I've also got to say I really admire John and the way he devours 3 newspapers a day. He wants to keep up with the world and everything that's going on, good and bad. Certainly there's a lot of those these days. But I think his curiosity and the goal of wanting to be part of the bigger world is a really important one. It's really important to all of us and our overall well-being. I think it's a key philosophy of life, actually. And John certainly embodies that. George, what you know John quite well. What stood out the most for you?
Yeah, Amby, John and I have become good friends over the years, and everything you say, he's just an inspiration, I think, to so many people. And I made reference to that birthday party in Alta, Utah, his 100th birthday party a year ago. And I was among 150 guests. And I don't know, Amber, you've probably never been to a 100th birthday party, and nor had
I
I.
haven't, but
But
I'm looking forward to a few.
yeah, well, I think, they're not easy to come by, as you know. And 150 guests showing up in a fairly remote place. A lot of them traveled a long distance to get to Utah for it. Just speaks to a lot about John. And it was just a great time out there. And finally, there was a big birthday dinner, and John showed up in a tuxedo, and he got up and he took the microphone, and he just chatted away. Incredible sense of humor. He made it fun for everybody. He was, generous of spirit, which is what John is. He's got a big, loving family, and he just everything about our conversation, Amby, I thought was a guidebook on how to age and how to do it at the highest level. I mean, he's just a special person.
Well, we've always said that this podcast is about some of the smartest, some of the fastest. Now we've added some of the oldest runners on the planet. And John, and it turns out a whole lot of the people we've interviewed really lead full, wide, curious lives. And that's one of the things that makes them so interesting to all of us. And I'm not sure we'll ever get another guest older than John, but if we do, so much the better. And that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed sharing the time with you. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. In signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving, onward.